The House will come to order. Calendar for the day. The first bill on the calendar for the day is House File 2369. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 2369, number 1 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to labor, the second engrossment.
I recognize the author of the bill, the member from Hennepin, Representative Hassan, to explain House File 2369.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Tonight, the bill in front of us is the TNC bill, or also known as Uber and Lyft bill. I first want to thank the community that's here tonight. I want to thank the drivers and advocates who have spent many, many months talking about a problem that they had no way to get remedy for. Someone told me when I first got elected, you're elected by the people and you're accountable to the people. So these community members came to us with a problem. About a year ago, I was invited to a community meeting organized by the drivers. Chair Noor and I and Senator Fattah attended that community meeting. It was attended by hundreds of drivers. And they talked about horror stories about how unsafe it is to drive Uber and Lyft. They talked about how little they got paid. Just think about this. I want to paint a picture. Somebody buys a car, pays for the car, puts gas in it, pays for insurance, pays for wear and tear, spends all their hours driving that car. How much does that person deserve to get paid? Somebody with a sound mind will tell you, or with a reason, will tell you, 90%, 80% of the pay should go to that person. Well, come to find out that some of the stories the drivers shared with us, that sometimes they get paid 50% of the pay. They have their backs to a stranger driving a car. They have no control of what can happen. You could get hit, you could get spit on, you could get shot, your car may be carjacked. Anything could happen to you. You have no control over it. This is a unique bill because it's not pushed by an interest group or a fancy lawyer or a lobbyist. Nothing against lawyers. I know this chamber is full of lawyers. But it's a bill that is put together by a group of concerned citizens. Unless you are a Native American in this country, somewhere along the way, somebody in your background came here as an immigrant. The people that you see in the balcony today, many of them are immigrants. Many of them got here because they were chasing the safe haven that's called the American dream. My family came here in the early 90s, and we were running away from war. We were running away from, being killed, being raped, or dying because of famine. I appreciate this country because it gave my family a second chance to start over, a second chance to go to school, a second chance to get a job, a second chance to even dream big enough that I'm standing as a state rep in these chambers tonight. Many people don't get that second chance. When there is a chaos in a country, many people get killed. Women get raped. Many people die crossing our borders to get here. But these people made it. They made it here. They're Minnesotans just like all of us. All they're trying to do is to work in an environment that's safe, that they're able to take care of their families. I think when we think about Uber and Lyft, people think about just a part-time job or something that, college student who is just for summer, who's here home for the summer is doing. No, many of these members that are sitting there, this is their full-time job. This is how they take care of their families. This bill that's in front of us tonight tries to level the playing field with drivers and the TNC companies like Uber and Lyft. It tries to give a voice to people who are voiceless in this space. As we know, technology is way advanced than the law. We're constantly playing catch-up with technology because somebody somewhere is coming up with a new technology every day, which is amazing. It's wonderful. Somebody came up with the Uber and Lyft app. That was really innovative, creative business model, which is what America is all about. But for that somebody to get paid and become a billionaire, or that entity to become a billionaire in the backs of these poor people who are working hours and hours, is unfair, unjust, and un-American. That's why we're here tonight. I have so many different articles that talk about what's happening, because I know that somebody's gonna say that we have no business being in this space talking about a private company and what they do with the people that do the work, and people have the choice to do whatever they want. If you choose to drive Uber, then that's your problem, not state problem. Well, guess what? I was elected by the people, and I am accountable to the people. This article, The Insider, it's a very recent article, says Uber and Lyft have long said that they pay drivers fairly, but they haven't shared the data so they can prove it. This one says Uber and Lyft drivers say that they're struggling because it's unsustainable to drive with the fares that they're paid. This one says Uber and Lyft claim record profit shares while the drivers got paid nothing. This one talks about the deactivation we're going to talk about tonight. Unfair deactivations and low pay. Why am I sharing with you all of this? Because like I said, I want to paint a picture of why we're talking about this bill and the reason why I got involved in this bill in the first place. This bill establishes fair pay for the people that are sitting over there. They came this morning at 10 o'clock. I went out, talked to them before I went to caucus, and I said, this bill won't be heard until later. Can you just go home? They said, no, we're not going anywhere. They have been here, and if you went outside, you have seen them. They have been here since 10 o'clock. And every single hearing that we have had, they showed up. They showed up 8:30 a.m. for the judiciary hearing with Chair Becker-Finn. They showed up, full room, that was a full house for the labor, the same with commerce. They consistently showed up to say that we need your help. What does this bill do? This bill has changed so many times. So what it does is we started with very ambitious idea of like saying that we're going to ask Uber to pay for insurance, to pay for gas, to pay for wear and tear, to all of that. But right now, after making so many changes to this bill just comes down to two things. it comes down to compensation rates. Uber, when they first started in this state, about roughly 10 years ago, they were paying people $1.95 or 96, I'm not sure the math on that, per mile. Today, 10 years later, they pay between 69 to 85 cents per mile, 10 years later. Well, guess what? Our lives didn't get cheaper. Our lives got more expensive. We have seen what happened with gas and inflation. We all enjoy Uber. I take Uber, Lyft. I prefer Lyft, but I use it because I am an anxious driver when it snows, so I don't drive in the snow. So if it snows, I sometimes will say that I don't want to drive in the snow, so I'll take Uber. And I have conversations with people when I'm in their car, just to be pleasant, you know. I was taught to have good manners wherever you go. And one day I was going to the airport and I had a conversation with the guy. I'm like, hey, how is driving, you know, this car, and how do you guys get paid? And we just start talking, and he said, how much are you paying? And I said, it's gonna, you know, roughly about 40-ish something dollars, a little over $40, because it was rush hour. I was going to the airport, and then he showed me the receipt. I cannot remember, but I think it was either $11 or $18, somewhere around that. That's how much he gets paid, but I'm paying almost 40-something dollars. So this bill right now in front of us tonight have been through so many different changes, and I want to uplift one person who has worked with me on this, Representative Dowd. We had a commerce hearing. He said he wants to help. We had a conversation. You know, we're in the middle of a busy time, but he did convene a hearing. He tried to bring the two sides together to have a conversation. Thank you for your time. All of us should be outraged with what's happening with Uber and Lyft. And all of us should have no problem supporting this bill tonight, because it's about it's about fairness. As we know, Minnesotans enjoy the protection of having some of the greatest labor laws. I remember when I first got elected in 2019, we passed one of the toughest and best wage theft laws. I was very proud to press that button. But guess what? 3 years later, when I heard what's happening with Uber and Lyft, my heart sank, because I thought by passing that green button, we were protecting all workers. Because everybody deserves to be protected. And at the end of the night, all these people are asking us to do is to feed their family and to go home at the end of the night in one piece. That's all they're asking us to do. I look forward to the conversation, but I beg you and plead with you, let's have respectful conversation, because we have community members here tonight that have been working on this for the last year. Thank you.
There is an amendment at the desk. Representative Garofalo is authoring the DE 13. The clerk will report the amendment.
Garofalo moves to amend House File Number 2369. The second engrossment. The amendment is coded DE 13.
I recognize the author of the amendment, the member from Dakota, Representative Garofalo, to explain the DE 13 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, I would request a roll call on the amendment.
Representative Garofalo requests a roll call vote. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call vote. Representative Garofalo.
Mr. Speaker and members, what we're hearing today is from the other side of the aisle is we have a bill that the intent of this bill is to put more money into the pockets of the drivers. Those who have stayed here, and first of all, to the citizens who stayed here all day today, thank you for sticking around. I wish we would have got to this bill earlier today, but thanks for sticking around and being here. There's nothing wrong with a good-spirited debate on issues. Thanks for sticking through the process. But what members need to understand, at the very same time that the DFL majority is talking about putting money into the pockets of these drivers, the DFL is advancing bills to take money out of their pockets. Just today, we saw the DFL is advocating for raising the gas tax in the state of Minnesota. Now, does Uber pay that gas tax? No. These drivers are paying it. You're taking money out of their pockets. Earlier this session, we saw the DFL enact sales tax increases in the metro area. Does Uber pay for the sales tax? No. These drivers are paying the sales tax. So if you're going to be here to advocate for these young men and women who are working hard in our communities, and if you're going to be putting money into their pockets, if that's your stated goal, you might want to stop taking money out of their purses and wallets, because that's what you've been doing all session. Now, the bill we have before us today, we know what effect this is going to have. We know what the effect of this bill is going to be. It's not going to raise wages. It's not going to raise compensation or give more flexibility. It's going to put people out of work. And the reason why we know that is because we've seen from Uber, we've seen the memo that has gone out publicly, that if we enact Representative Hassan's bill, who I like, by the way, she's a good member. Just wrong on this bill, but a good member, Representative Hassan. That Uber says this will greatly limit our ability to remove dangerous drivers from the platform, including drivers accused of sexual assault, sexual harassment, impaired driving, and discrimination. This will double the cost of a ride for Uber, making rides cost more than any other place in the United States of America. And quoting, if this bill were to pass, we would unfortunately have no choice but to greatly reduce service throughout the state and possibly shut down operations entirely. Now, Mr. Speaker and members, we have a lot of computing power and technology from these companies that are providing these services. And it's important to recognize this technology has been a godsend to Americans. Ride-sharing services have given freedom to people who did not own an automobile or did not trust the safety of our transit platforms. It saved lives, a dramatic statistically measurable reduction in the amount of drunk driving deaths. And one of the benefits of this technology is these companies, they know exactly where to price their product before there is demand destruction. Okay? As smart as the other side of the aisle is, I can promise you that Uber, Lyft, they know more about the appropriate pricing structure than you do. Okay? So if you raise prices, there will be a point at which demand is destroyed. And when demand is destroyed, that doesn't put money into the driver's pockets. It doesn't provide guarantees of production. All it does is kill jobs. So, Mr. Speaker and members, what my bill does, it does what we should have done from the beginning. And that is it commissions a study to find out what the impact of this legislation would have. Right? Measure twice, cut once. Don't shoot first and aim second. That's what this bill does here today. Gives us an opportunity to move forward, to involve stakeholders, address these issues, and find out what is possible, rather than statutorily mandating what a private business must pay specific independent contractors for their services. Mr. Speaker and members, I would ask for members' support of this amendment. Thank you.
Further discussion to the DE13 amendment. I recognize some member from Morrison, Representative Kresha.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, thank you, Representative Garofalo, for this amendment. I support the amendment. Members, as we get ready for a long debate, and thank you to everyone that's here, let's ask ourselves a couple of questions. As I've researched this and looked at many, many other relationships with independent contractors and companies, the question is Uber a transportation company or is it a software company? It's not a transportation company. It's a software company with a network of independent transportation companies. Uber is not in the business of delivering transportation. They're in the business of offering a software that independent entities can use for their own personal services. So take this away from this for a second and think of all of the other software companies out there. This isn't just about the Uber and Lyft bill. This is about any enterprising young person or old person or someone who comes with a software to allow other independent entities to promote their services. The beautiful thing about what happens with the ride-sharing software is that it empowers networks of transportation providers who couldn't write that software on their own. Members, take this into the realm of the creative class of software designers, website designers, and so forth. As a website designer, you wouldn't write your own website platform. You would contract or you would pay for the services of a software platform to use those website platforms, very similar to WordPress, where you might buy some of the apps and so forth, but you are the independent contractor. You are not the one writing the software. This bill and our premise going into it has this wrong. Uber is not a transportation company. And the providers of this, the originators of this, wrote a software to allow a network of transportation providers to use that. Members, this is a dangerous path when we start to play with this. This doesn't just stifle ride sharing all throughout Minnesota. This will have huge ramifications for anybody that wishes to design platforms for independent contractors. In the work that I do, when I travel community to community and I give talks about how you try to get economic development in your communities, one of the things that I remind them is the best thing that you can do is attract the next 25-year-old Harvard dropout who designs a platform software. Because they bring jobs, they bring ideas and innovations. Members, we don't want to be that state that takes the next innovation and closes the door on it. So with that, I support the Garofalo amendment, and I hope you'll vote green on it.
Further discussion to the DE13 amendment. I recognize the member from Isanti, Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Thank you, Representative Hassan, for your comments. Just a question for the bill author, if she would yield for a question.
Representative Hassan will yield to a question. Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And just so we know what direction we're moving here, you've got a DE amendment that changes the language in the underlying bill. It was based on a conversation we had yesterday. It's my understanding that you're planning to offer that DE amendment. Typically in the chamber, that amendment comes up first, the author's amendment, and then just so we know what we're talking about, is it your intent to adopt that DE amendment tonight? Because that DE amendment is quite a bit different from the bill that is before the body right now. And as we work through this amendment and others, it's nice to know what we're going to be working on.
I will remind members that Mason's 101 debate must be confined to the question before the body. The question before us is the DE13 amendment. I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Hassan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The plan is, yes, we will accept that DE amendment. There is a reason why it's here with us tonight.
Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative. I just felt like it was appropriate to set the table with that, because as we work through this, that DE amendment is completely different than the underlying bill. So just so we know what we're working off of. I don't think that's a violation of any Mason's question to try to set the table with that with the author, and I appreciate the author explaining that for the body. Also want to express my appreciation for, I expressed in committee that I was, I think it came about because I said in committee that normally when a bill like this comes forward, where you have differing parties, in my time here, when I've seen this sort of thing be successful, it happens when those parties come together around a table and with a little help and nudging from those of us in the legislature, they come to agreement on these provisions together, and then we pass a bill that reflects those agreements. That's not always the case that it works, but I would say 90+% of the time, that's what makes these things successful. So I also want to express my appreciation to the small business owners who have joined us, who are the drivers of Uber, and I have probably ridden with all of you over the years. I'm a very frequent customer of both Uber and Lyft when I'm in the Twin Cities here, and I appreciate the service that you provide, and I'm thankful for this platform that allows you to be a small business owner in our state here. So we certainly appreciate you and appreciate you being here today. I want to speak in favor of this amendment. I think we're nearing the end of session where we've got a lot of stuff left to do. We've got a lot of budget left to do. This obviously is an issue that is important to those that are impacted by it. Sometimes it takes a little more time, and it takes a little more study, and it takes a little more conversation to get folks together. So I want to speak in favor of this motion to study this a little bit further, and hopefully over the interim we can come up with a solution. And I think if I can be part of that, Representative Hassan, I certainly want to be and am willing to be if you think I can be helpful. I really only offered because somebody with my skill set needs to keep busy around here, otherwise I get myself in trouble. And I think it's beneficial to you and to me for you to keep me busy around here. So very happy to use my talents if I can to help bring folks together and find an amicable solution to the issues that are outstanding on the bill. So I would encourage members to support this amendment.
Further discussion to the DE 13 amendment. I recognize the member from Itasca, Representative Igo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to stand in support of this amendment here today and what it would bring to this conversation. Before I get into my remarks, I was wondering if the bill author will yield to a question.
Representative Hassan will yield to a question. Representative Igo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So we've been talking a lot about just the major ride-sharing platforms, Uber and Lyft. But my question, Representative Hassan, is how would this affect things like DoorDash, Postmates, Uber Eats?
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Hassan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Speaker, tonight we have Uber and Lyft in front of us, and we're not talking about DoorDash, or this has nothing to do with DoorDash or Uber Eats or any of that. Thank you.
Representative Igo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Upon reviewing the bill and looking at these types of fees, it looks like they would be applying to those types of services. So the concern I have, and I think this is what happens when we have rushed legislation, we're not taking the time to look at it, we're going to have consequences that we're not going to see happen. So, I mean, I just did simple math. If we apply what's in this bill in front of us today to your average, DoorDash or Uber Eats order, we're going to see the price double. And I know a lot of people, when they're looking at ordering food to their home, they already look at that as a luxury. So if you add the taxes that Representative Garofalo is going about of a gas tax, a sales tax, increasing tab fees, a delivery tax, we're going to increase that price where people aren't going to do it. And then you know where my biggest concern is? The people sitting in this chamber right now watching us aren't going to get those orders. They're going to lose business. I see what the bill is trying to do here today, but that's why Representative Garofalo gave us an opportunity to think twice, act once. Because otherwise, I'm really scared we're going to put people out of work. And with the policies being enacted in this chamber right now, we can't put any more people out of work. Vote green.
Further discussion to the DE 13 amendment. I recognize the member from Carver, Representative Nash.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, members, I wholeheartedly support Representative Garofalo's amendment. First, let me also say thank you so much. When I travel, and I do travel for a living, probably not as much as one of our members in the chamber, but I do travel a lot as I fly from state to state giving presentations on cybersecurity. And when I go, I don't ever have the delusions that there will be a taxi there. I always take Uber or Lyft because your cars are always clean, you're an amazing service, and I like talking with you as we go to my destination because I like hearing the stories of how this platform has enabled you to become a business owner, that you can dictate how many hours you want to work or when you don't want to work. And I think that that's fantastic. And I love the service because it is very fast. As a dad of kids who are of drinking age, I love knowing that that is an availability because there have been times where I'm Uber dad. I have to drive and pick up a kid or a handful of kids who are in need of a ride. I love that they can use their phone and usually within a matter of minutes, you all are there. But here's my concern about the bill and why I support the Garofalo amendment is in state government finance, we've heard a number of things that are creating a task force to learn something about what it is that we're talking. I mean, Chair Cleavorn has a task force on aging that has made it all the way to the bill. that will, I don't know when we're debating that. Maybe you can tell me later. That's a question I have. But we should be studying the ramifications of what this could do well before we're actually going to pass something that may have some really outrageous ramifications. Representative Garofalo read the statement from Uber. That's concerning. And when we have these things that are, the bill will have some heavy consequences. And I know, Representative Hassan, you and I are building a very good relationship, and I do appreciate that you do a lot of work. But I think that this is really worthy of doing a study. That way you can look into all the what-ifs and possibilities that may come to fruition if the bill were to become law. I know for a fact that when I have a couple of trips scheduled, I'm going to speak in Las Vegas and in Chicago, and that's just in the next couple of months. I will be using my phone and I'll be getting a ride. But I'm worried about what happens to Minnesota. And when I was first a kid here in Minnesota, and we talk about it here in the floor sometimes, we talk about Minnesota exceptionalism. Well, you're turning Minnesota exceptionalism into a whole new thing. We are about to have exceptionally high taxes. We are going to have exceptionally high fees in the metro area. We're going to have exceptionally high gas taxes here in the metro area. We're going to have exceptionally high regulations that come into existence. We're going to have an exceptionally high number of mandates on schools. And now we potentially have an exceptionally high cost that will come to people who choose, wisely so, to ride on a very good platform with people who perform an amazing service. So I think that it would serve us well to do the study that Representative Garofalo has proposed as this amendment. Not because we're trying to delay things necessarily, but we don't want to do something that will have really a very heavy-handed consequence potentially. And we want to make sure that we're dotting I's and crossing T's and getting the data, which is what a study does. You get data. We should be data-driven legislators. And I know I talk about it all the time, but we should do data-driven analysis. That's what comes out of a study. Because oftentimes we go into bills, and I know that you've had a lot of community meetings, but I think that there's always another side to something that we didn't see. I've learned that in my time here as the legislature. I've had bills that I thought I'd done tons of research on, and then somebody comes and tells me, well, here's another viewpoint that you didn't consider, and I would really appreciate it if you did. I think that a study is a worthwhile effort. I think that it provides us actionable data points that we can put into the form of a draft of a bill, move it through the process again as an informed body. Support the Garofalo amendment.
Further discussion to the DE13 amendment. I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Hassan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What we have in front of us in this DE13 is studying a problem that already we know what the problem is, and we are offering the solution. So saying that this bill needs to be studied a whole year, that means a whole year that folks that are sitting at this chamber tonight with us that have been working in the last whole year, like we've been working on this problem for a whole year trying to find solutions. Our first solution wasn't, oh, let's write a bill. Our first solution was like, write an email to Uber and Lyft. Really nice email. Hey, you guys, there's a problem with your entity and the drivers that provide services to the people. What can we do? It was meeting with Uber and Lyft. It was another meeting with Uber and Lyft. So to say that the whole year, the work that you have done is for nothing, let's study another year and find out, come back to the same conclusion, really doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for the people who have worked on this. And it shouldn't work for anybody. Vote no.
Further discussion to the DE13 amendment. I recognize the author of the amendment, the member from Dakota, Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I appreciate the debate. I would ask members to support this bill. Again, it is about preserving jobs and not having the heavy hand of government come in and destroy what has really been a proven success story for creating opportunity and saving lives. This would not be the first time this legislative session that the majority party has changed their mind on a matter. We know a couple weeks ago that Rochester Mayo reached out and advertised to you quite vocally the effects of legislation that you were proposing, and you've responded to that, and you'll be making an exception for them. I think it's important that you respond to the communication you received from Uber and Lyft, that you do not want to be killing jobs and killing investment in our state, and let's have a proper study on this to make sure that we understand both the benefits and the downsides. I ask for members' support. Thank you.
The clerk will take the roll on the DE 13 amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 60 ayes and 69 nays, the motion does not prevail and the DE 13 amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Hassan moves to amend House Law number 2369, the second engrossment. The amendment is coded DE 12.
I recognize the author of the amendment, the member from Hennepin, Representative Hassan, to explain the DE 12 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This amendment, what it does is, like I said, we started with a very ambitious plan to address many problems in this bill that the drivers brought us. And we came to the consensus that we can address all those problems in this session. So, like I told you, Representative Dodd, that I am deleting the insurance piece. The insurance piece was the most complicated. I don't know anything about insurance, but I learned a lot in the last few months about insurance and how hard it is to really put together a package for insurance for the drivers. So right now, the DE in front of us does a couple things. It addresses the driver compensation, and we decided to divide the driver compensation two tiers. The first tier is for the 7-county metro, and the second tier is for greater Minnesota. We understand that many people may not use Uber and Lyft in greater Minnesota, but if they do, we want to make sure that we can keep it affordable because they're the ones that have to go the farthest because they have many miles to go. So with this DE, the trips in the metro are going to be $1.45 per mile and 34 cents per minute, while the trips in the metro area are going to be $1.25 and 34 cents per minute. There is a minimum fee of $5 per trip, and the cancellation, if the driver already left to pick up the person, 80% of the cancellation. Right now, Uber and Lyft charge you cancellation no matter what. You just press your phone and say that I want a car, and if you cancel within a certain time period, you get charged money. But that money doesn't necessarily mean the driver gets it. So if this says if the driver left and they're on their way to get to you and you're charged cancellation fee, 80% of the cancellation fee should go to the driver. And sometimes we learned that, the TNC companies charge for a long pickup when somebody has to drive many miles to do pickup. If that is charged, we're saying that the drivers shall get $1.25 and 10 cents per minute. Sometimes it's charged, sometimes it's not charged, and that's why we want to make sure if charged. And then the deactivation process. One of the biggest problems that the drivers talked about was somebody gets into your car, they don't like something about you. They don't like your accent. They don't like anything about you. I could just say that my driver was rude, even though they didn't say anything to me. If I say my driver was rude and terrible and I get deactivated, if I can, as the rider, I can say whatever, and there is no remedies, there is no appeal process, there is no system in place that says, okay, well, this driver said this, the person said this, how do we figure this out? So the deactivation process was one of the biggest concerns, was that how do drivers make their case if they didn't do anything? And many of the drivers here have told us that, like, I have been deactivated because somebody was rude to me. Somebody said, I don't like your accent. Somebody said that they didn't like to write the fact that many of the Uber drivers are Muslims and they hate Muslims, and why are you all here or driving? And they just press that button to say that you are a terrible driver, you get deactivated. Once you get deactivated, then there should be a process in place. The process right now in place is that the burden lies all on the driver. Like, you have to prove that whatever it is that you did or didn't do, there are no cameras in the car. There is no way to say that this person did this person, it's, he said, she said, but the passenger doesn't have to do anything. So your whole fate, when you purchase a car, and this is your livelihood, your whole fate lies on the hands of a stranger who's in your car, and they can say whatever they want. So this talks about that there has to be, unless there is extreme circumstances, and if there is, I'm sure the TNCs have some rules of agreement. So if the rules have been violated, such as like there's a crime committed, if there's sexual assault, if there's all of those things that are criminal, but person should not be deactivated because somebody didn't like them, or somebody didn't like their accent, or somebody was having a bad day. If I'm having a bad day, I should not be taking it on someone else and deactivating. And mind you, the drivers many of them drive brand new cars. So that means that there's a payment on that car, there's a family that they need to feed, and somebody deactivated them, and mostly it's permanent deactivation, because either the TNC do not like to follow their own rules, or there are no rules in place. No one can tell you that. So that's what this bill does. It talks about transparency, it talks about that people shouldn't be discriminated, and then the right to sue. If somebody thinks that they were wrongfully accused of something, or that there was multiple people who came, gentleman, his name is Abdullahi, and I think he's sitting somewhere up there. Somebody came into his car, he gave them a ride. After the ride was over, he hit him with a metal bar and took his phone and left them there. Abdullahi went to the ER, he was taken to the ER, was in the hospital for many months. When he came out of the hospital, his account was deactivated. And he, tried to pursue a criminal case against that person. That person was 17 years old, and nothing happened. But here you have a man who was in the hospital for many months, comes out, he has no way of supporting his family, and he has no way even paying for his medical bills. Just think about it, who pays for those medical bills? That's something to ponder over. We pay, the state pays. When somebody who doesn't have medical insurance goes to the ER, we pay. And if somebody doesn't have a job and has a family to support, we pay. So this DE just cleans up the bill and saves some other fights for another day, and just deals with some of the bare minimum. And believe me, we have given up a lot. I mean the drivers, we have given up a lot to just say that we're going to do the bare minimum, which is the rates, fixing the rates, and the deactivation system. Still, the deactivation lies with the TNC, but we're saying, like, you should follow your own rules. And if you don't, here are some suggestions of how to follow your rules. Please vote green. Thank you.
There is an amendment to the amendment. Representative Perryman offers the A14 amendment. The clerk will report the amendment.
Perryman moves to amend House Law number 2369, the delete everything amendment. The amendment is coded A14.
I recognize the member from Stearns, Representative Perryman, to explain the A14 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, tonight I would like to move the A4 amendment, which adds transportation network company drivers to increased penalties for assault of a transit operator. As Representative Hassan said over there, this is a lot about safety for the drivers. And that's what my amendment will really focus on. And before I go on, I would like to thank Representative Hassan and Representative Hassan for talking with me yesterday and talking through my amendment and making sure I was on the right track of what I really wanted to do for the Uber and Lyft drivers. And they were very positive. I hope 24 hours didn't make them change their mind, but they listened to why, and they also listened to why I wanted to do it and what I was doing for the drivers and what it was doing for her bill. And as we left together, they were both very inclined to accept my amendment. So thank you, Representative Hassan. The amendment is good with good intentions. It's about people and their safety. As Representative Hassan has said in all her opening remarks, it is about safety. The amendment is all about workforce safety for our hardworking transportation network drivers. Of these drivers, many are my constituents. They are living in my area, but driving to Minneapolis-St. Paul to work on weekends to make extra money. So this is a workplace. Their car is a workplace for them, and it should be a safe place. And I also heard from many of you up there and many in my office, your concerns from your families, your kids, and yourselves, the concern you have for your safety. This amendment would increase the penalties and fines for anyone that would assault a driver, providing extra level of worker safety. The safety of all our workers is paramount to productive economy and growing businesses in Minnesota. Let me repeat that, because in all businesses, safety should be key to our workers and is paramount to productivity of our economy and growing our businesses and our employees. Work area safety on the job is important, and cars are a workplace for these drivers. In committee, a big concern I heard was the safety of drivers. You'll notice safety is used a lot here. There were other concerns, but these stories had really an impact on me and others that were testifying and that were in the room. And as a business owner, and as a wife, and as a sister, to hear these family stories, it made an impact for me. And I'm going to give you a few examples. We had testimonies that told horror, I think Rep. Hassan used the word horror stories, and worried for their safety. One Uber driver was brutally attacked while driving a passenger in his vehicle was attacked. In testimony, he even wore the blooded shirt he had on when he was attacked. This does leave a lasting impression. Insult to injury, the 17-year-old who attacked the driver was released with no consequences. Finally, we all have heard and can see in the news crime is rising for rideshare drivers, and rideshare drivers are truly disproportionately impacted. And you can see that and hear it in the news. Drivers and their families come to my office concerned about their safety, and their families worry about them being injured on their job, or even worse. Families have told me they are worried from the time that their spouse or family member leave their house or leave that door until the time they return home, that they have comfort that their spouse or whatever family member does return. These compassionate stories really made me think and wanted to talk to stakeholders, other drivers, researchers, and the non-bipartisan staff to find a way to increase the protection of these hard-working men and women that provide vital transportation to, like Kurt Doubt and Representative Nash, vital transportation needs in our community. This is what this amendment does. This is what keeps them safe. So many of these drivers are my constituents, as I said, and it is interesting to hear how many people live in my St. Cloud area, but they are driving up here for Saturday and Sunday during the special events to be Uber or Lyft drivers. Again, taking care of the Kurt Doubts of the world and the Rep Nashes of the world for airports, you name it. I'll bet everyone in this room has taken a Lyft or Uber before. So, with this in mind, I did see a missing piece. In all respect to Representative Hassan, that's when I went to her and asked her about this missing piece of the bill, and that the safety of these drivers, and they were drivers for our workforce, and that we needed, and I wanted to talk to her about a piece doing that. So that is how this came about. So I would ask the members to support this work safety amendment so we can protect the men and women that provide a vital transportation need we have all, and I'll repeat, I think we all have used. Let's protect workers, and I'm asking everyone, please vote green.
Further discussion to the A14 amendment to the amendment. I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Hassan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Rep. Perryman, for this amendment. Yes, we are talking about safety of the drivers, and I do care about the safety of the drivers, and I will say vote green on this amendment. Thank you.
Further discussion to the A14 amendment to the amendment. I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Perryman. You know, we heard this bill in labor. I know Representative Hassan and I had talked about this, and actually Representative Hussein and I had talked about this a little bit more in depth. You know, the day before we heard this bill, you know, I had actually heard a story about public transportation drivers being assaulted, and also an Uber driver being assaulted. And I just want to applaud Representative Perryman for bringing this forward, because this is a really good amendment that, you know, I'm thankful that Representative Hassan is supporting. You know, it's something that we can do to really protect our workforce, protect our transportation. So I would, you know, tell everybody to vote green.
Further discussion to the A14 amendment. I recognize the member from Stearns, the Minority Leader, Representative Damath.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I stand in support of the Perryman Amendment. This is an important amendment, and I'm glad to hear that it sounds like we'll have bipartisan support on it. And I want to briefly just share a story why I believe this is so important to include our Uber and Lyft drivers in this amendment. When I was a little girl, my dad drove for MTC. He drove the bus, even before they had the articulated buses, and that was something that he moved forward. But I can remember being in elementary school, and I got home from school one day, and my dad had been taken to the hospital. So as my dad was driving, he always kept a small tool bag behind his seat. And he was a stickler for people that actually paid their fare. And it was a fare box where coin or tokens went in, and I'm probably aging myself because I know that has changed. But it was very important to him that people wouldn't take advantage of a system. So when someone was not going to pay the fare, he encouraged them to do that. That particular day, one rider thought that they shouldn't have to pay the fare. They became angry, reached in the tool bag, grabbed a hammer, and hit my dad over the head. He was taken to the hospital and received stitches. He ended up to be okay. He was all right, but I can remember as a little girl being so worried the next time he went to work what would actually happen. So knowing that this amendment would provide extra protection in the event something goes wrong for our Uber and Lyft drivers. I stand in full support of this. And then the second piece is the 17-year-old that you mentioned, Representative Hassan, should have been held accountable for his crime. But I stand in support, and I would ask everyone to vote yes on this amendment.
I recognize the author of the amendment, the member from Stearns, Representative Perryman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, members. And all I can say, go green!
All those in favor of adopting the A14 amendment to the amendment, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails, and the A14 amendment to the DE12 amendment is adopted. There's an amendment to the amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Weiner moves to amend the Hassan amendment to House Bill number 2369, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A32.
I recognize the member from Todd, Representative Weiner, to explain the A32 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would request a roll call.
Representative Weiner requests a roll call vote. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call vote. Representative Weiner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to offer the A32 amendment. I think this is a pretty common sense amendment. And what it does is offers permanent deactivation for committing kidnapping. Now, in the last couple days here on the floor, I've kind of railed a little bit about listening to both sides. And I have to admit that when it comes to Uber, my experience is non-existent. So when Rep. Perryman said that pretty much everybody in here has experienced Uber, I can say that maybe I'm the anomaly to that. Okay, there's a few others. Thank you. I don't feel so alone now. But I would also like to thank the drivers for being here. I understand what it's like to be a small business owner. I understand that the struggles, the challenges, and I want to thank you for being here, because when we talked about listening, this is part of my process to learn as well. Having not experienced anything like this, I think it's important to hear both sides of the argument or the discussion and figure out how those things affect each other. I brought up the issues in greater Minnesota, how if small business isn't there, how it affects when other businesses want to come in. And I brought up the film issue. Well, at some point in time, I will probably have to use an Uber. I don't know when. But if I come down to the cities or if I go to a different area and Uber isn't available, what are my options? And if we create legislation that would, like was recommended before or suggested before, have negative impacts and actually drive these businesses out, I have to make a good decision, and I have to get all the information as possible as I can to make that good decision. So with that, I would like to offer the A32 amendment, and I already requested a roll call. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion to the A32 amendment. I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Hassan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I believe all of us would really are against kidnapping. So this is a no-brainer that I say just vote green. Thank you.
Further discussion to the A32 amendment. I don't recognize the member from Morrison, but I do recognize the author of the amendment, the member from Todd, Representative Weiner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I guess there's not a whole lot more I have to say at this time.
The clerk will take the roll on the A32 amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 129 ayes and 0 nays, the motion prevails and the A32 amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Whitty moves to amend the Hassan amendment to House File Number 2369, the second Grossman as amended. The amendment to the amendment is coded A42.
I recognize the author of the amendment to the amendment, the member from Dakota, Representative Whitty, to explain the A42 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I offer a friendly amendment. The amendment is A42. Drivers will be permanently deactivated for committing a DUI. There is a drafting error on the state statute. It should be 169A.20. But before we do that, can I request a roll call?
Representative Whitty requests a roll call vote. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call vote. Representative Whitty.
I believe most of us in this chamber don't want a tragedy to take place. We have an obligation to protect the public. Tens and thousands of Minnesotans rely on rideshare as an affordable transportation option or valuable earning opportunity. Thank you to the drivers in the House tonight. We need to have high standards and hold those accountable who lower those standards. We want to be successful for the drivers. We want to protect the good independent drivers and owners. But we also all have loved ones using this service. My family and 3 daughters have used it. And as a father, I do worry them getting back and forth and rely on this safe transportation. The state, after a DWI, can begin the process of revoking your driver privileges, and they are privileges right away, long before conviction. I thank you, and please support this amendment for the safety of all our Minnesotans.
Discussion to the A42 amendment. I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Hassan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I don't think any of us want our loved ones of ours or ourselves in a car where somebody is impaired. So I'll say vote green.
I recognize the author of the amendment, the member from Dakota, Representative Whitty.
Thank you, Representative Hassan, and thank you, members. Please vote green.
The clerk will take the roll on the A42 amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 125 ayes and 1 nay, the motion prevails and the A42 amendment to the amendment is adopted. There is an amendment to the amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Novotny moves to amend the Hassan amendment to House File Number 2369, the second and Grossman as amended. The amendment to the amendment is coded A46.
I recognize the member from Sherburne, Representative Novotny, to explain the A46 amendment.
Thank you, Speaker Wolgamott, and thank you, Representative Hassan, for this bill. And this amendment is just to enact and make sure that we include the newly made crime of carjacking, and we included the language of not only convictions, but stays of adjudications given by the propensities of some county attorneys to go with downward departures or stays of adjudication. I understand that you consider this a friendly amendment and request a roll call.
Representative Novotny requests a roll call vote. Seeing 15 hands, so there will be a roll call vote. Any further discussion of the A46 amendment? I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Hassan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I just want to highlight and put this on the record that the drivers do go through background checks, and there are tight rules about crime, any kind of crime. But I will say this is a friendly amendment. Vote green.
I recognize the author. Further discussion to the amendment. I recognize the member from Todd, Representative Weiner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Representative Dowd yield to a question, please?
Representative Dowd, will you yield to a question? He will yield. Representative Weiner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I stated before, my experience is rather limited in this field. Could you run through the process of using this service to someone who has never experienced this before? Representative Dowd?
I recognize the member from Isanti, Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative. I'm just reading the amendment as well because I don't want to get sideways of that. But just, yeah, in way of background, you know, the Uber and Lyft, it's an app on your phone. You, as a rider, you can pull up the app, you can put in where you want to go. It actually sees where you are currently. You select your destination. It's actually pretty intuitive, so it's like Google Maps or Apple Maps where it kind of fills in for you. Like, for instance, if I need to go to the airport, I just put MSP, and then they pop up Terminal 1, Terminal 2, you have a bunch of choices. So it's pretty intuitive that way. I can select that I need to go to the airport. The app will then, I'm trying to remember exactly how this looks when you do it. The app will then show you how much the estimated cost is. And this, I guess I'm talking about Uber right now. And it will show you the different cost for different types of vehicles. So you could do just a regular Uber, you can do there's one that's a little newer vehicle. There's the Uber Black. I should probably just do it on my phone right now so I could see it. And it's that quick, actually. And you can select which type of vehicle you want, and then you select that, and then you press a button to see what, tell it that's where you want to go. Then it asks you to confirm where you are on the map. So if you're inside your building, you might want to move it a little bit to the curb where you're going to meet them, or down to the corner or whatever. Sometimes if you're in a place like the airport, and you want to be picked up at the airport, it will give you some choices of where to be picked up because there's specific pickup locations at the airport. So it might say, I think there's an A and a B pickup location at the main terminal. So you can pick one of those. And by way of common sense, on the upper level as the Uber drivers are coming, the B is the first one and A is the second one. So maybe somebody someday could fix that. It seems like the A should be the first one and the B should be the second one. But anyways, so you just, you put in where you are and select accept, and then it kind of just gives you that little, like it's looking for a driver, and it shows you the map, and it starts to, and then it finds a driver. And the way I understand it works on the driver's side of the app is that the driver will see your trip pop up, and they can accept it or decline it. Of course, they're looking for rides, so I assume they would want to accept that. They accept it, and then it shows in your app that a driver has accepted, and it'll show you how many minutes away from that pickup location they are. And then you can see the type of vehicle, you can see the driver's name, a little picture of the driver, and you can see how many minutes, and you can see their license number, which is important. So that's kind of the verification. When they get there, they'll pull up, you see the vehicle, you check the license number. When you get in the vehicle, they will ask you your name. That's their verification. Are you Kurt? You say, yeah, I'm Kurt, and okay, and they may verify where you're going, they may not, and you just ride to your destination. When you get to your destination, you get out of the vehicle, and all of the charges happen in the app. So you have already put in your credit card and it will just charge your credit card after the fact for that trip. So it's like...
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Tabke, please state your point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While I do love former Speaker Doubt's regaling us with how Uber and Lyft work, which is very accurate, and I have the same experiences myself, so thank you for that. But Mason's 101, debate must be confined to the question before the body, and there is nothing that Representative Doubt is discussing about the amendment itself, which is about the permanent deactivation of a driver. And so I just would appreciate sticking to what the amendment is about. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Members, please confine your remarks to the question before the body. Representative Doubt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative and Representative Tabke. Obviously, I'm answering the question, and I assume that the member asking the question who maybe hasn't used, I was actually surprised a couple of people back here have told me they have not used Uber before or Lyft before, and that actually kind of surprised me. For me, it's super convenient, and I like to use it. I actually will pay more. I don't like to drive my car to the airport and park it in the parking ramp where I can't find it again when I get back. Or one time I lost my keys on a flight, and the keys actually went back from Minneapolis to Atlanta and then to Charlotte. And they actually found them on the plane in Charlotte, and they mailed them back to me. So thank you, Delta, for that. That was a few years ago. But I just was kind of surprised to hear some people have never ridden in an Uber or a Lyft before. So sometimes to know how you want to, vote on some of these amendments, it's important to at least have that background. I'm not trying to delay anything. I actually am very passionate about it. I love Lyft and Uber. I think it's one of those great kind of American things that I'm glad we have. And so, obviously this amendment helps to keep that safe, and I'll be supporting this, I hope. But I believe people need to know, and we shouldn't assume that every member of the legislature knows about this bill and the underlying bill or knows about how the service works. So this is one of the things I'm actually happy to share with people, because I think it's a great thing, and I hope more people use Uber. And that's going to cause surge pricing, so you're all going to make more money if more people use it. So we should, encourage and support our small business owners who are here today in the gallery by actually promoting these services, because I think they're great.
Further discussion to the A46 amendment. Representative Wiener, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That helps me out a lot, because having no knowledge of something and then having to decide how this is going to go, or to vote on this bill, this amendment, how do we make an educated decision when we're voting on something if we don't have all the information? So excuse my lack of experience in this realm. I wouldn't look down on somebody if they came out to my area and I told them, just go ahead and take that tractor out. Just get in it. Go ahead. Push the buttons. You know what you're doing. So, this is important. We're making decisions that affect people across the state. And when I travel and I want to use this service that these people are offering, I want to make sure that it's safe and secure, as we all do. And I want to know how the system works, because I've never used it before. So thank you, Representative Dowd, for explaining that to me. And thank you, Representative Novotny, for bringing up the amendment. I think it's important. I like to understand these things. Oftentimes I sit back here and I listen intently. I don't say a whole lot most times. I listen quite a bit because I want to know. So thank you very much for bringing that up. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize the member from Stearns, Representative O'Driscoll.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I think that was a very instructional and insightful, I'll call it a lesson, because we've had an education bill. We've talked about education here on the floor quite a bit this week from Representative Dowd. If you have never driven Uber or Lyft, when we represent all corners of the state of Minnesota, this service may not be available in your district. And when Representative Dowd was asked the question about could you explain how it works, I think it provided some comfort and some background to the members in here for the underlying amendment that we were looking at here today, the A46 amendment. And how does it do that? Because this particular amendment, it ties back into the question about the safety of the participants in an Uber ride, and on both sides of the equation, on both sides of the coin. So going through, excuse me, got something caught here in my throat. Just a minute. Maybe we should make sure Uber drivers have first aid training too here. But I've got Representative Backer back here, so I'm feeling pretty good. Oh, I don't anymore. Oh my goodness, I'm on my own. But I go back to the issue at hand, and that is, you ever have that tickle in your throat? My goodness, it's embarrassing. But I will push through. I will push through. So here we go. Again, Representative Dowd is explaining how Uber works, and we're working through this issue of safety. And I think that provides some checkpoints in here. He talks about you go to the app, tells you where you're going to be. You're going to be able to connect the driver and the rider together with their license number. And being able to, don't worry, I'll get my voice back for later on tonight, talking about more amendments. Don't worry about me. I'll be good. But again, the idea that it provides some background and some safety on here. And again, I encourage a yes vote on the A46 amendment. And I'm just really impressed how agreeable this body is tonight to try to help these small business owners tonight. And I look forward to the A12 amendment being adopted, and we might actually be able to help folks here tonight. And so with that, Mr. Speaker, I again encourage a yes vote on the A46 amendment to the A12 amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion to the A46 amendment. I recognize the member from Morrison, Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and members here tonight as we discuss and debate this bill. And I think about this particular amendment and really appreciate that this has been brought forward. And so thank you, Representative Novotny. And I am a user of both Uber and Lyft. And frankly, Representative Wiener, I actually have to tell a story. You're really not all that limited as to how far you can go with an Uber or Lyft. Especially in 2022, I had a couple car accidents, and you and I, we share a district boundary, and in that, and the amount of traveling I was doing around the state, it meant that I had to get a rental vehicle. And if you didn't know, because of supply chain concerns and because of rampant inflation and issues with workers going to work, we had some challenges in not having enough cars, which meant that in our rural communities that there weren't rental vehicles that were available. The only place that rental vehicles were available in the entire state of Minnesota wasn't St. Cloud, it wasn't Duluth, it wasn't Moorhead, it wasn't Mankato. The only place that rental vehicles were available were at the Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport. And so for us, Representative Wiener, when we are trying to get about while our car, following a car accident, is in the shop, and have to get a rental vehicle if someone on the farm doesn't have a vehicle to travel, it has put us in a place where we have to go and find an enterprise that's at the airport. And so in my case, I had returned my rental vehicle back to the airport, but then needed to get back to the shop. And the shop was in your district, and right there just outside of Cedar Lake, but in Todd County. And fortunately, the great work of our Uber and Lyft drivers, they took me from the Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport all the way to Todd County. Quite expensive, quite expensive. You're right. But in a tight workforce shortage that we have right now in Minnesota, I didn't want to take my friends from their jobs that they're working. Remember, and Representative Wiener, you and I both know that in our community, the dignity of work is taught from a very young age. And that's picking rocks on our family farms and working at the local convenience store as early a time as state law will provide, if not scraping around the edges. And so I didn't want to encumber one of my friends who was on the job. And so on that day, and especially for us, because when it's a 2-hour plus drive to drive from central Minnesota to the Minneapolis-St. Paul airport, you know, it would have been a full round trip for my friend or my family member. It would have been essentially a day, an entire day's worth of wages that they would have lost. My decision when I needed to get from the Minneapolis-St. Paul airport back to central Minnesota, near Nancy's Bait and Tackle, by the way. You might know where they are. They're great people. When I had to do that, I decided that Uber and Lyft was the best route. And when I took that trip, and it was a safe trip, great driver, clean car. When I did that, it was, I believe, Representative Dowd, I believe it was about a $240 trip. About a $240 trip. Now, fortunately, you know, thanks to my car insurance and having gone through that accident, that was all going to be covered. So fortunately, that all worked itself out. But I think that just accentuates the point that this is a key and a vital service that we have here in our state. And frankly, I think that the flexibility that we see in this technology and these app and these ride-sharing services is really important for the citizens of Minnesota. And you know, frankly, I want to make sure that they are here for years and years and decades and generations to come, so long as this is the best technology that's employing great people to keep our communities safe, which then kind of accentuates the point of this particular amendment. Representative Novotny, we know that across this state there have been many carjackings, and I hope that Minnesota isn't an outlier from other states around the country, but certainly we've seen a lot. I mean, we watch the news on a nightly basis, or some of us watch on Twitter and Crime Watch Minneapolis and stay up on the news, and so carjackings have become something that is really challenging for public safety across, especially the Twin Cities. For Representative Wiener and I in central Minnesota, fortunately, I don't remember the last time we had a carjacking, but again, that's happening down here. There's carjackings that are happening down here, and it's something that we need to address. It's something that I thought we could have addressed in a greater fashion during the public safety bill. But thankfully tonight we have this chance with this amendment from Representative Novotny to make sure that the drivers who drive for Uber and Lyft and work and do a great job at providing this service, that they don't have a history or a record of carjackings. And so, you know, I think this is helpful, members, because you know, this is getting to some of the biggest heart of what we want to do, and that's ensuring that we're setting a state policy and a state law, a state standard for safe workplaces and good people and keeping our community safe. You know, many of us ran on a platform of public safety in our own campaigns, and certainly that was, for me, I would say that was a top tier, top 2-3 issue in the election cycle. And the only other thing that I would think maybe even topped that, at least in my district, would have been affordability. So affordability and public safety were right up there near the top. And so when I think about providing for some new language in this particular bill that Representative Hassan has brought forward tonight, I'm grateful that we have the chance to vote on making sure that those that individuals who have been convicted of carjacking, that they won't be the ones that are the drivers using Uber and Lyft, because we must make sure that Minnesotans who are using this service, that they're safe. And frankly, I think that's the good thing. If we get this bill right tonight, Representative Wiener, and for the members of the body, if we get this bill right, the opportunity is that more Minnesotans will be safe, that the drivers will return home safe to their families. And I sit on the labor committee, and we heard through the conversation, and some of it has been mentioned already, but some of our Uber and Lyft drivers aren't making it home safely. And with this amendment and others that we'll hear tonight, if we can get them adopted, we can make this bill better. And so, as it relates to carjacking, this is an amendment that we should support to make sure those drivers are safe, that we're helping people get home to their families or to their next destination, maybe the airport, safely. So I'll be supporting this amendment. I hope that we have a fully green board on this tonight, because if there's anything, I think that with a good bill tonight, members, with a good bill that protects the people of Minnesota, strong public safety, I actually think that more people will use Uber and Lyft as compared to Metro Transit. And we've seen massive concerns along the light rail lines throughout this city and the Twin Cities. If you haven't heard, there's been a lot of crime on that as nearby as this intersection with Rice Street and University, where the light rail line is. There's been some concerning incidents that have happened there, but thankfully, this bill will help make sure that our Uber and our Lyft rides are safer. And so I will be supporting this amendment tonight.
Further discussion to the A46 amendment. I recognize the member from Isanti, Representative Johnson.
Mr. Speaker, members, Representative Novotny, thank you for this amendment. I want the members to take a close look at it. We have carjackings, which are actually armed robberies or robberies, happening all over the metro area. It's a serious issue. But it's not just happening down here. It's happening in St. Cloud. It's happening in Duluth. It's happening in Rochester, where we also have Uber drivers. The idea of this amendment is that if a person is convicted of carjacking under the new statute, that they are permanently deactivated as an Uber driver. Yes, Uber has good background checks when you first start, but that doesn't mean they continue to check on their drivers and the criminal history reports. What this does is an opportunity for, if they find out that they can terminate and deactivate their ability to be a driver for the safety of the others, the safety of the people using the service. I've used it numerous times. It works great. And I also know that those drivers, they're being checked on. But it's not only for the safety of the drivers, it's also for the safety of the passengers. So thank you, Representative Novotny, because we want to keep not only the drivers safe, get them the funds that they deserve, but also to make sure the passengers and those that use the service are safe. Thank you.
Further discussion to the A46 amendment to the amendment. I recognize the member from Douglas, Representative Franson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. So I find this very interesting. So anyway, I decided that I would use the Google and see about what's happening in Minnesota when it comes to carjackings and Ubers and Lyfts, whatever. Personally, I'm a Lyft user myself because when I use Lyft, I also get a mile per dollar I spend for Delta Airlines Sky Miles. So that's why I personally use Lyft. I used to be kind of cheap. Just to tell you, I'd go Uber, Lyft, see which one is cheaper, and then go with that one. But now I would just rather earn the Skyline miles. So I'm also a Lyft, was it Pink? Lyft Pink? Because then I pay a fee, but then I also save money when I book, and I can get a car faster. So I pay for that service when I'm down here or traveling across the state. Across the nation if I ever go to another state. which is very rare these days because airfare is very expensive, people. Okay, so anyway, I did a little Google and thought I'll just Google Uber carjacking Minnesota just to see if this is an issue, because I know sometimes we make things up in this body because we're just trying to get a vote, okay? Well, I shouldn't say we make things up. We might stretch the truth a little bit. We don't ever make things up, right? We might stretch the truth a little bit. So lo and behold, imagine what I found. From the United States Attorney's Office, District of Minnesota, from the Department of Justice, a press release dated Thursday, October 27th, 2022. Minneapolis man pleads guilty to violent carjacking conspiracy targeting Uber and Lyft drivers, assaulting a federal officers. And so, according to court documents, between September and October 2021, this guy, he was 20 years old, and his co-conspirators, so there was more than just this guy here, engaged in a series of violent carjackings and armed robberies targeting Uber and Lyft drivers. As part of the scheme, members of the conspiracy lured victim drivers to particular locations under the guise of picking up or dropping off passengers. When the victim drivers arrived, members of the conspiracy brandished firearms and demanded the cell phones and wallets of the victim drivers. Can you even imagine? The Lyft or Uber person is going about their business. They get a little ping on their phone or pops up that Joe Schmo. No offense to my colleague in the back there. His name is Joe. But Joe Schmo wants to be picked up. So Uber Lyft driver goes, picks up Joe Schmo, and it's a scheme. It's a scam to assault the driver. I can't even imagine. So anyway, when the victim, blah, 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 members of the conspiracy forced the victim drivers at gunpoint to unlock their cell phones and provide passcodes. The conspiracy members then transferred money via Cash App or other applications from the accounts of the victim drivers to the members of the conspiracy. So anyway, I'm just standing up to say, you know what, this is a real thing, members. Carjacking is a real thing. So please vote in favor of the A46 amendment. Thank you.
Further discussion to the A46 amendment. I recognize the author of the amendment, the member from Sherburne, Representative Novotny.
Thank you, Speaker Wogamud. So anyway, we had a recently enacted law that just came in through the omnibus bill with carjacking, and I just want people to recognize that this is a new statute and that is checked on when they're doing the background checks. Members, please vote green.
The clerk will take the roll on the A46 amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 127 ayes and 2 nays, the motion prevails and the A46 amendment is adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Scott moves to amend the Hassan amendment to House File Number 2369, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment to the amendment is coded A16.
I recognize the author of the amendment, the member from Anoka, Representative Scott, to explain the A16 amendment to the amendment.
Thank you, Speaker Wolgamott and members. This amendment would, it just says that a driver must be subject to a permanent deactivation if the driver is convicted of or receives a stay of adjudication for criminal sexual conduct under, and then it lists the statutes for first through fifth degree sexual assault, and then also mentions it cites the statute for criminal sexual predatory conduct. And members, this is an obvious one, right? We want to make sure these people, and as Representative Johnson said earlier, they do a background check initially, but that doesn't mean that those are ongoing. And so if something pops up in a database that these people should not be, they should be deactivated and not taking passengers anywhere. And we received a packet earlier, and this packet of letters is signed by Minority Lead Damath. And one of the things it mentions is that a lot of different people, nonprofits and such, use Uber that we may not think of. We think of taking it to the airport, or we think of getting us from one place to the other when our cars broke down, or those circumstances. But one of the things that, one of the entities that signed this letter is RISE. And folks, we've had some discussions here with Human Services and the health committees about folks that, with disabilities that have jobs. And most of those folks don't have driver's licenses, and so the ride sharing that used to happen with what's the Metro Mobility and different entities like that are short on staff, short on drivers. And so I didn't know this, but Uber, a lot of these folks will get to their places of employment using Uber or Lyft. So the folks in the balcony are getting them from their homes to the places where they work and are employable. And so also folks that signed this letter, Montessori American Indian Child Care Center, Minneapolis Regional Chamber even signed this, and talks about people that don't have vehicles needing to get to, using Uber and Lyft to get to work. So members, I encourage a green vote and would ask for a roll call.
Representative Scott requests a roll call vote. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call vote. Further discussion on the A16 amendment? I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Hassan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And we are just going down the road of like, let's just find everything under the moon and under the sun and say things that are already illegal. These are all things that are already illegal. These people go through background checks, and they will not be hired if they are in any of these statutes. If they are sexual predators, if they do carjacking, if they drink and drive, all of this. With that, I'll say just vote green for the sake of the argument so we can get out of here at least a decent time tonight.
Further discussion to the A16 amendment? The author of the amendment, Representative Scott.
Well, Speaker Wolgamott and Representative Hassan, thank you for agreeing to take the amendment. I guess the point that I failed to make on the people that are using some of these services, they're some of the most vulnerable people among us. And as was stated, background checks are done initially, but they're not done routinely after that. At least that's not what I've been told. And if you have an 18-year-old college student girl that's maybe had a little too much to drink and she gets in an Uber, I mean, we just would need to make sure that these people are vetted and stay vetted. So I encourage a green vote. Thank you, members.
The clerk will take the roll on the A16 amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 128 ayes and 0 nays, the motion prevails and the A16 amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
New Brindley moves to amend the Hassan Amendment to House File Number 2369, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment to the amendment is coded A48.
I recognize the author of the amendment, the member from Chisago, Representative New Brindley, to explain the A48 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Hassan, you are correct. We are going through a number of things that are indeed already illegal and ensuring that they are added to this bill. Because as you said, when you introduced the bill, or perhaps when you introduced the DE, I don't remember now, but you talked about how these drivers have their backs to these passengers and they're in a vulnerable position. And you said anything can happen. And that's 100% true, which is why I'm glad that we added the amendment to afford some protection to drivers. However, these things are already illegal, but background checks are not done all the time. We've talked about this. There's an initial background check done, but that's not a routine part of being an Uber driver, is doing those over and over again. And so a lot of things can be missed. Someone might not have a criminal record when they sign up, when they start to be or to contract with Uber or Lyft, when they start to drive for these companies. But they certainly can be convicted. And I think it's important to note, in the A48 amendment, it's not just a conviction. And very specifically, the A48 amendment would disqualify a driver. They'd be subject to permanent deactivation if they're convicted or they receive a stay of adjudication. And I want to be very clear, it's not just a conviction. A stay of adjudication also applies. And while that's not a conviction, it is an admission of guilt, which is why that piece of this is so critical. But the A48 amendment applies very specifically to the possession of pornography involving minors, child pornography. So if someone were either convicted or received a stay of adjudication, basically for having possession of child pornography, they would be disqualified as a driver. They would be subject to permanent deactivation from the platform so that they would not be eligible to drive for Uber or Lyft anymore. And it's interesting, and frankly, I'm encouraged that Representative Hassan seems to think that, yes, these are obvious things. But I'll be honest, it was not obvious to me that the majority party would take any of these amendments. I had an amendment I had an amendment on this floor, I suppose. It's been a little while now, a few weeks. I had an amendment to say that folks convicted of the most egregious crimes, rape, murder, premeditated murder, second-degree murder, murder with intention, rape, first-degree rape. That is rape that involves children. That is rape that involves penetration. This is ugly stuff. And the majority got rid of that amendment in conference. So forgive me for my skepticism as we were preparing these amendments to think that the majority would just take them. Although I'll be honest, I'm still skeptical. I know it's really easy to hit this green button tonight, It's really easy to hit this green button and say, oh yeah, I'll vote for this amendment. Because frankly, we're kind of on to you. We're kind of on to you, Democrats. This has been your MO this section. Yeah, we'll just take these amendments here on the floor. We'll send this thing to conference. We'll just get rid of them. Then the bill comes back. It's not amendable. We can do whatever we want. We'll get exactly what we want. We'll just get rid of this stuff in conference. So I hope you understand the nature of what we're talking about and the severity of what we're talking about tonight. I received some notes from some users of Uber and Lyft, actually. I'm looking through my notes here. I received some notes from users of Uber and Lyft. And frankly, there were hundreds. There were hundreds of drivers, not just riders, hundreds of drivers that have emailed legislators asking to oppose this bill. We're trying to make it a little bit better tonight. But we heard stories from people like Callie, who said, as a blind person who often relies on Uber and Lyft to get around, I'm writing you to urging you to oppose this bill. These bills would make rides less safe for me to take with my children by keeping dangerous drivers on the platform and increase costs so significantly that rideshare would become cost prohibitive. Getting around as a blind parent to my kids' school and activities is difficult enough as it is. Please do not make it even harder. You can increase pay for drivers and improve the system without hurting the ridership that fuels the work. Please do this responsibly. Rather than jamming it into the final 2 weeks, please do not pass a bill that risks making Minnesota the only state in the country without rideshare. As a blind person, transportation is a huge barrier. Don't make it even worse for me and so many other disabled Minnesotans. As Representative Scott talked about, there are vulnerable people who use these platforms as a primary mode of transportation. There are vulnerable people who need access to these platforms. There are vulnerable people for whom the massive cost increases in this bill are going to have a negative impact. In fact, the estimates based on this DE, ridership is estimated to decrease by 30% with these costs going up. Interestingly, in Seattle, where similar legislation was passed, ridership is at 50% of its pre-COVID levels. 50%. Hasn't come back. And really, ultimately, this is the irony in all of this. We're doing this for these, presumably, we're doing this for the drivers. But the reality is, when demand goes down, when ridership goes down 30%, drivers aren't going to have work. That's the irony of all of that. So when we bring up these stories, when we bring up these amendments, I understand that it may seem obvious. It certainly seems obvious to us. It certainly seems obvious to us that you would take these amendments. But frankly, we didn't necessarily expect that. In fact, I don't think we knew until we came to the floor that you were actually going to take these amendments. I figured you'd vote no. And then, like I said, I remembered, oh, wait, you'll vote yes on the floor. Make that easy. Let's just get out of here. We'll vote yes on the floor. We'll just take them out in conference. So it will be interesting to me to see how this bill comes back. Because I actually think it's really important. I think it matters that when someone is convicted or at least has made an admission of guilt to possessing child pornography, then that person should not have access to children in their car while they're driving. That person should not have access to children. This one is a no-brainer to me. It sounds like, I hope, that the majority will take this amendment tonight, but I hope you take it seriously. I hope when you go to conference committee with this, that you don't do what you've done on all these other bills, that you actually keep these safety measures in place, that you agree and fight for the idea, that you don't just hit a green button tonight, but that you actually fight for the idea that someone convicted of child pornography should not have access to children in their car. And like I said, I read this story from this woman from Cali, someone who needs this service. She is blind, and she said very specifically that she uses this with her children to get to their school, their activities. This is how she gets around. And so I don't think that a driver who's been convicted or has admitted guilt of child pornography should have access to her children. And again, I hope you don't just press a green button tonight, because I think that's what you might do. I hope you actually fight for these protections, because these families deserve it. Minnesotans deserve that protection. And I would ask for a yes vote on the amendment.
Further discussion on the A48 amendment. I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Hassan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I just want to, correct the record that the background checks on the drivers are not one time. They are annual. Drivers have to do annual background checks. And I hope that children are not riding this by themselves. I will say vote green. We do not want people who are terrible nowhere near children, so please vote green. Thank you.
Further discussion to the A48 amendment. I recognize the member from Todd, Representative Weiner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And thank you, Representative Scott, for your comments earlier, because that's something that I had never really considered. I had always just kind of assumed that people using these services would be like myself. I had never considered the most vulnerable who would be using this. So thank you. I had a couple speeches today, and I started off with giddy on one and excited on the other, but today I'm enthralled. Right now, I'm enthralled. This discussion, this education, this is free education. I'm actually getting paid to learn here, and I love it. So, I do have a question, and would Representative New Brindley yield to a question?
Representative New Brindley will yield to a question. Representative Weiner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Doing a little bit of research into this bill. My wife says I need to slow down when I'm talking. I generally talk a little bit fast, and there's an auctioneer here, so I'm kind of used to that. But I'm going to try to slow my speech down a little bit, because she says it's hard to hear when she's watching at home. So, Representative New Brindley, you brought up the concerns with child pornography. Is there an age limit where people can ride? Could a young person take this service? 13, 14? I haven't been able to find anything. Granted, it's limited time. Is there an age limit that you're aware of?
I recognize the member from Chisago, Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And actually, you know what, Representative Weiner, I don't know for sure. It's been so long since I set up my own account. I don't remember if there was, a button you had to click that you were a certain age. I mean, typically, as Representative Dowd walked through it, you set it up on the app with all of your information. You would have to have a phone. You'd have to have a smartphone with an app. You'd have to have a credit card of some kind, or I suppose maybe a debit card, but you'd have to have a credit or debit card to be able to put in the app, because as Representative Doubt said, these things are automatically charged. But honestly, I don't know the answer to that. If there is an age verification, if that is a piece of it, I don't know that there is.
Representative Wiener.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So my limited research that I was looking into this, it talks about the background check. And what I did realize looking into this is that it varies. It varies from city to state from what I read. So thank you for bringing this amendment up. I do believe it's important. As a father, I think about maybe I'm not using Uber, but at some point in time, my children will. They will be using this service. And do I want them to be safe and secure? And I'm sure the services that these people are offering right now, I'm sure it is safe and secure, but there's always a bad apple. And how do we make sure that one bad apple can upset spoils the batch, or whatever the saying is? And if there isn't a statewide regulation on that, because it does vary from city to city, state to state from what I read. So I am concerned about this. And I thank you once again, Representative Brindley, for bringing that up. I think it's very important. Would Representative Franzen yield to a question, Mr. Speaker?
Representative Franzen will yield to a question. Representative Wiener.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I kind of felt that maybe you had an answer to that question. You seemed rather, giddy or excited. So I would, is there an age limit where an individual can? Because my kids do have a credit card used for emergencies. So if they have that ability, they have the phone, is there an age where an Uber, if they could order an Uber, would that be available to them?
I recognize the member from Douglas, Representative Franzen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Wiener, so I have a daughter that lived down in the Twin Cities, and she went through the stage of sneaking out of the house. And I know, right? Well, she's 25 now, so we're past that stage. But during her phase of sneaking out of her dad's house, she did utilize the Lyft/Uber as an underage child. Now, you are supposed to be 18 years of age. I assume she didn't have a credit card, so I assume she used her debit card to do such a thing. And then, according to the guidelines, the Uber Lyft driver, if you look like you are under the age of 18, they can tell you you're not allowed to ride in that vehicle. Now, fast forward to a little bit more recent timeline. My son was down here for the wrestling tournament, and he and his friend down here, because they're both in wrestling, and they wanted to watch the state tournament. So anyway, I did not want my son driving around downtown St. Paul, so I was trying to figure out how we were going to get him, because I was here, to the Excel Energy Center, because I didn't want him walking those few blocks from the hotel where he was staying to the Excel Energy Center because of the safety concerns that I had. When I found out that his friend, who is not 18, had an account set up. So yes, it is possible for a minor who's not 18 to utilize the Lyft or Uber.
Representative Wiener.
Thank you, Representative Franzen. As I'm sure everybody here who is a parent, or not just a parent, but everybody wants to make sure our kids are safe. So I think this is a common sense amendment. Makes good sense. and I would support it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion to the A48 amendment to the amendment. I recognize the member from Clearwater, Representative Grossell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Hassan. I heard you say you recommended a green vote on accepting this amendment to the amendment, and I really appreciate that. Really appreciate that, because when you look at the amendment itself, it's talking about permanent deactivation of a driver is convicted, if convicted, or receives a stay of adjudication for possession of pornographic work involving minors under section 617.247. And all of you know that I've been working hard on trying to make sure we take care of our children, protect them from these types of predators, the predators, child pornographers. And in order, let me just paint you a quick picture of possession of child pornography. Possession of child pornography, it's not just an accident that happens, that they go to these dark places on the web to find imagery, videos of child rape, torture, and humiliation, and possess those, try to possess those types of videos and imagery. And it's usually hundreds upon thousands of images, videos, and all of this stuff depicting for people's entertainment. This is for their sexual gratification. This is for their entertainment that they do this stuff, okay? So to keep somebody from driving, and I know we got a lot of good Uber drivers out there, and they wouldn't want somebody driving kids around or driving really anybody around if they have that in their background, because folks, a lot of these people, in order to get to these sites, in order to get onto these sites, a lot of them will have had to produce their own videos, their own pictures, their own imagery of child rape and torture, okay, and humiliation, in order to get on some of these sites. So if you've got somebody, if somebody has that in their background, that means that they have done these things. They've possessed this type of material. They've probably traded in this type of material, but with the way Minnesota convicts, with the way Minnesota, the major portion of convictions are in the possession area, predominantly in the possession area. And so to try to protect the riders, the users of this service, please, and again, Representative Hassan, I thank you for recommending a green vote on this so that we can protect those who are using this service, so that we can make sure that the good drivers are out there, the people that are out there trying to give a good service to the communities. So again, thank you for that green vote on it.
Further discussion to the A48 amendment. I recognize the member from Douglas, Representative Franzen. Representative Franzen is no longer seeking recognition. I recognize the member from Chisago, Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't think Representative Franzen did seek recognition. She was very confused. I would just request a roll call on the vote, please. Mr. Speaker, I just request a roll call on the vote, please.
Representative New Brindley requests a roll call vote. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call vote. Representative New Brindley. Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the A48 amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 129 ayes and 0 nays, the motion prevails and the A48 amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
O'Neill moves to amend the Hassan Amendment to House File Number 2369, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment to the amendment is coded A37.
I recognize the author of the amendment, the member from Wright, Representative O'Neill, to explain the A37 amendment.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. So this is a pretty common sense amendment. We've been having a lot of conversations tonight about different crimes and making sure that Uber drivers and Lyft drivers haven't committed different crimes. And this is similar to that, but I do want to talk just a little bit about background checks. Because when I first came to the legislature 11 years ago, I just assumed there was one background check. And for those that work in criminal law, you realize very quickly that there are multiple different types of background checks. So there are over 100 different types of background checks, and they all pull different pieces of information. And one of these days, I'm going to get to actually going to the BCA and looking at their massive grid and try to simplify it in some sort of way, because it is a monstrosity. So when we say background check, it is very wide. It could be all kinds of things. So I'm not going to ask Representative Hassan to yield, but I just want you to know, Representative Hassan, that when you say background check, for someone like me that's been here a long time and has worked in that part of law, it could be a lot of different things. So we really, you shouldn't assume what is being pulled for a background check. And so this amendment actually gets to that, because this is one of those things that could not be in a background check. It's possible. And this would be a permanent deactivation for anyone who has a conviction or a stay of adjudication for violating a harassment restraining order. So why that is so important is we need to understand just a little bit the difference between a harassment restraining order and an OFP, or an order for protection. An order for protection is more for someone in your household would take it out, or an intimate partner, and they are a great fear for their safety is the primary reason, or even fear of worse than that. And so they take out an OFP, an order for protection. A harassment restraining order is very different. Similar in some ways, but it is very different. This could be somebody that doesn't live in your home, that you don't have an intimate relationship with at all, but you feel very, very threatened by. Let me give you a for instance. What happened at the Alina Clinic in Buffalo? I have talked about this many times on the House floor. We had a very disgruntled patient from the Alina Clinic in Buffalo who threatened a doctor, Dr. Bergdorf, threatened him repeatedly. Dr. Bergdorf was so terrified that he went and got a harassment restraining order. And within 2 weeks of that harassment restraining order being issued, that patient, his patient, violated it and showed up at his workplace. So when you violate a harassment restraining order, the criminal charge is a misdemeanor, and it is a criminal charge. Now, it is only a misdemeanor, so it may or may not, and this also includes stays of adjudication, so this may or may not be in a background check, because again, there are more than 100 different types of background checks, Representative Hassan. So many of these things that we're bringing up are probably in the background check, but it's possible that they are also not. But in this case, what happened when the harassment restraining order was violated is nothing, because he had some mental health issues, and COVID was happening, and so the city attorney dropped the misdemeanor charge. Then he went out and purchased a gun. And you all know what happened after that. He shot 5 people. He killed 1. So harassment restraining orders are not a small deal. This is a very big deal. It is an indication that that person has got a real problem with another person, potential problem with violence, has a problem with boundaries, and is not a safe person to be driving an Uber and a Lyft. Now, that being said, I have taken both of those many, many, many times around the world. And I have never, ever had an instance where I ever felt unsafe. And, you know, we have many wonderful drivers up in our balcony, and I thank you for giving me many rides to the airport and many other places when I have needed it, and I have always felt safe, and I've always felt welcome in those vehicles. And those are the folks that we really want driving Uber and Lyft. Someone that has violated a harassment restraining order, we do not. Let me make that very clear. If there has been a violation of a harassment restraining order, that is not a safe person, and that person should not be driving an Uber and a Lyft. And I would ask for a roll call, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm so sorry to catch you off guard, Mr. Speaker. I'd like a roll call on my amendment, please.
Representative O'Neill, there's no need to apologize. I do see 15 hands, and there will be a roll call. Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So thank you, members. I think this is a really important thing. And again, it may be in that background check, and it may not, because there's the state of adjudication part of this is something that could be in, it could be out. We're not really sure. So just to make sure that we have closed that loophole and made sure that someone that has the potential of being dangerous is not behind a wheel of of an Uber or Lyft, we ask that you would support this amendment. Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion to the A37 amendment. I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Hassan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Since I'm accepting a lot of amendments tonight, I'm hoping I'm going to see a lot of green at the end of this bill. I'll just say vote green. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion to the A37 amendment? I recognize the author of the amendment, Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I appreciate it. We're all very tired and it's getting very late, so I just asked for a green vote. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The clerk will take the roll on the A37 amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 129 ayes and 0 nays, the motion prevails and the A37 amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
O'Neill moves to amend the Hassan amendment to House File number 2369. The second engrossment as amended. The amendment to the amendment is coded A17.
I recognize the author of the amendment, the member from Wright, Representative O'Neill, to explain the A17 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'm just going to ask for a roll call right up front so we're...
Representative O'Neill requests a roll call vote. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call vote. Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That's probably easier for you. So members, this is a pretty simple amendment, but it has a lot of importance. And it would be a permanent deactivation of a driver who receives a stay of adjudication or a conviction for a violation of the Predatory Offender Registry. So Predatory Offender Registry, it used to be called the Sex Offender Registry, and now it's Predatory Offender Registry. But if there's about 19,000 or so people that are on our Predatory Offender Registry, and I know Representative Mueller and I have looked at this quite extensively to try to do some reforms in it and make it more usable and better for officers and investigators to use. But the problem is there's 19,000 people on it, and they have to register once a year. It's a fairly simple process, and it kind of keeps track of people at updates. Where do you live? Where do you work? What's your contact information? And so on. So it's a pretty low bar, in my estimation, of keeping up with that obligation. And so if you violate that, that is not a good thing, because law enforcement, and we've got many law enforcement officers and retired officers in this room, you really need to know who those folks are. It is important, and you need to know their address, you need to know where they're working, you need to know their contact information, you need to know some of the close connections that they have. This is important when you've got a child that's gone missing, or you've got another crime that's a sexual crime in that area, that they can look at that list. It's been useful, although we're not quite sure how useful. Representative Mueller and I have looked at this quite extensively, and we're still trying to figure out how useful it is. But nonetheless, this is a really important thing. Even if they're just on the Predatory Offender Registry, I would argue that they probably shouldn't be driving Uber Lyft, because it's no small thing to be placed on the registry. That's a pretty important thing to know. So that's what this amendment does, is if you have violated keeping up with the BCA and informing them once a year where you live, where you work, all that kind of stuff, you are in violation of the registration requirements. And nothing good can come from that by not disclosing that information. We really do need to know that. So I would ask for your support and a green vote. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion to the A17 amendment. I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Hassan.
Vote green.
Any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the A17 amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 123 ayes and 0 nays, the motion prevails and the A17 amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Schultz moves to amend the Hassan Amendment to House File Number 2369, the second and Grossman as amended. The amendment is coded A30.
I recognize the author of the amendment, the member from Morrison, Representative Schultz, to explain the A30 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. And I think this at this stage, it appears like this might be the most bipartisan bill with the amount of amendments we've been able to adopt on an exceedingly bipartisan basis, and I'm hoping to continue that this evening. So with this, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to request a roll call.
Representative Schultz requests a roll call vote. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call vote. Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This next amendment is the A30 amendment, which seeks to provide additional safeguards and protections and guardrails so that drivers with Uber and Lyft and others that are transporting our Minnesotans across the state, that the drivers haven't before been convicted of murder or stays along those lines. And this might sound simple, but this is all about public safety and about instilling the trust that we need in this legislation because of the things that we've seen this session. This desire to weaken sentences for violent criminals in this state, and we really want to make sure that those same violent criminals that commit murder aren't the drivers in these facilities, and not in these facilities, but in these vehicles, working for these companies or being their own small business owners. And so I don't see that this should be a very controversial amendment because I know that everybody in this body, which has been shown in the previous amendments, is really about ensuring strong public safety as it relates to the drivers of Uber and Lyft and any other future providers that we may see. So that is the amendment, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion to the A30 amendment. I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Hassan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't know. I think tonight we're talking about murder, sexual assault. All of these things are illegal, you guys. So I don't know what we're doing, but I'll say vote green because I don't know anybody who supports murderers or lets them walk around free. So vote green.
Further discussion to the A30 amendment. I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Noor.
Mr. Speaker and members, I agree with my colleague, Chair Hassan. I know we will be here for too long if we do this. Dhammaantiin dadka na daawanayo na dhageysanayo waa inoo muuqataa dhanka mucaaradka inay danaynayaan waqti dheer inay qaadato anigoo dadka ixtiraamayo oo soo jeeday dhowr habeen anigoo og guushi inay soo dhowdahay anigoo og qof walba wax kastay maaragtay tallaabo kastay qaadaan inaan guushana laga hor imaan karin waxaan rabaa inaan ogeysiiyo hawshan gabagabo bay ku jirtaa dhowr qodob baan hadda ansixinay hal bog iyo bar baa noo dhiman waxaan naga raaligelinaynaa waqtigii dheer aad maaragtay soo qaadateen waxaan leeyahay caawa howl badan baa inoo soo dhammaatay hawshaanayta sida hadda u socoto waxaan malaynayaa ilaa biri subaxdii baa meesha laga baxayaa sidaa darteed raaligelin oo maaragtay buuxdo baa ina siinaynaa hawshaan sida hadda u socoto beritaan ku soo laabanaynaa soo seexda soo nasta markaa soo nasataana berita waa hawsha insha allah aan ku soo laabanayna waa mahadsantiin aad iyo aad baan iga mahadcelinaa thank you so much.
Further discussion to the A30 amendment. I recognize the member from Chisago, Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm really glad to hear that tonight everyone agrees that murderers should not walk around free. That is new to me, that's the position of this body. But I am happy to hear it. I certainly will be voting yes on this amendment, but it is still confusing. And you know, it's funny that we're acting as though these amendments are such common sense. Now, again, I agree with that. And yet, we just had a public safety bill on the floor a couple of days ago that got rid of the idea that, because I agree, I don't think murderers should walk around free. And I had an amendment to make sure that that wasn't the case, that the get out of jail free card didn't apply to murderers. But our public safety chairs got rid of that in conference. So I find it interesting and frankly thrilling. It's very exciting that now the majority thinks that everyone agrees that murderers should not run around free. I think, though, that someone should have a conversation with Mary Moriarty because I think that she still thinks that murderers should walk around free.
I recognize the author of the amendment, the member from Morrison, Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members, for the robust support that I've heard so far here tonight. And I only wish that I could understand what Representative Knorr was bringing to the conversation in his debate tonight. But at the same time, if there are those here in this body in the gallery and interpreting for them through your speech tonight, enhance their understanding of what we're debating here, I appreciate it. I assume, Representative Knorr, that you are offering your support for this amendment as well. Maybe he would yield to that question, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Knorr will yield to a question. Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Knorr, were you offering support for the A30 amendment?
Representative Knorr.
Ha waan taageeray amendment-kaad soo gudbisay.
Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not sure if it was the echo in the hall, but I did not understand. Were you offering support for the A30 amendment? Would Representative Knorr yield to that question?
He will yield. Representative Knorr.
I'll translate for you. I said yes, I support the amendment.
Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Representative Knorr. I appreciate it. Looking forward to a strong green board as we make sure that there are not murderers driving the vehicles that relate to these Uber and Lyft drivers. Thank you.
The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There being 126 ayes and 0 nays, the motion prevails and the A30 amendment is adopted. I recognize the member from Hennepin, the Majority Leader, Representative Long.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to make a motion in a minute, but just want to explain to our guests here that we weren't able to get our work done tonight on the amendments that we had offered, but we are going to bring the bill back and we will pass it. And with that, I move to table House File 2369.
Representative Long moves to table House File 2369. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails and House File 2369 is laid on the table. Motions and resolutions. There are copies of the non-controversial motions at the House desk and online. If there is no objection, we will take action on these motions first. Hearing no objection, the motions prevail. Announcements. I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Hussein.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I just want to announce that and let them know that today, solidarity for my community, one of the mosques was attacked on purpose. And this is not the first time. We noticed less than a month, 6 mosques has been attacked in Twin Cities. Representative Jay Sean was one of them about a week ago, 2 of them. And this morning, 7 a.m., I got a call from the imam, the church, and all the faith. They were praying together for healing. Worship place has no violence. And we want to make sure that for those people that are doing it together, we can hold them accountability. They're creating division in the state of Minnesota. And we have no place for hate crime in the state of Minnesota. We all know that. As a legislator, I'm asking both parties to condemn for those individuals that are attacking for worships, the place that we pray for God, the place that we ask for healings, the same way that we're protecting for the church and the other faith in the state of Minnesota. As the legislators, we need to protect everybody, the state of Minnesota, and I hope you can all join me to condemn for those people that are creating a hate crime in Minnesota. The police was able to identify it, but they're still investigating. So someone went in there and set up 4 tanks of gas to burn down the mosque, a worship place. Shame on them. Thank you very much.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, the Majority Leader, Representative Long.
Mr. Speaker, I move that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 11 a.m. Thursday, May 18th, 2023.
Representative Long moves that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 11 a.m. Thursday, May 18th, 2023. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. Representative Long.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House do now adjourn.
Representative Long moves that the House do now adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails and the House stands adjourned until 11 a.m. Thursday, May 18th, 2023.